This is
Good luck, everyone.
record. Okay. Okay. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our first panel discussion of the day, TEDx UWCSA 2020. So our first two speakers we'd be conversing with are Victor and Jasmine. Hopefully you've seen at least one of their talks. And well, the theme for this discussion was really stimulating change, which is seen in unique ways between both our speakers. So first, to get started, Victor, Jasmine, would you like to tell us a bit about yourself, your background, just the small little factors which may have influenced your different speeches?
Okay, I think I should start. I'm called Victor Agaba from Uganda, and yeah, that's pretty much
Oh, I'm
all
Jasmine Ongole. Okay.
So there's really not much about my background other than that influenced me to write this talk, to write this speech and give it. I just felt intrigued. I felt urged to share something that I had picked up over the years. I think this was since 3 years ago. I used to write down things I just found interesting or I thought I would find helpful later in future, and they ended up culminating into something I found inspirational enough and worthy of sharing with the world.
Thank you. Jasmine.
So I'm Jasmine. When it came to my speech, my background heavily influenced what the topic specifically, because as my topic speaks about, dark-skinned girls and the makeup industry and trying to redefine beauty, my experience with makeup heavily influenced it, and that inadequacy I felt within it helped me develop the speech and show people that it's very important to redefine beauty. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So, as you guys know, the theme for our TEDx event was the butterfly effect. So, I don't know, would you like to tell us maybe what the butterfly effect is to you, or how your talk relates to the butterfly effect, or how your talk can be a butterfly effect, rather?
Okay. I decided to for my talk at least, I decided to take the non-conventional method. So I wasn't talking in favor of the butterfly effect itself. I was kind of attacking it. So my talk is about the other side. I'm basically talking about how you can manipulate the negative side of your life to work for you, to how you can manipulate it to turn it into a positive and to improve who you become at the end of the day. So my whole idea stems from the fact that everything in life has a butterfly effect. So you cannot really blame the fact that who you are is a result of the choices, is one big culmination of the choices that you made. Because even if it is blaming the fact that there must have been some kind of butterfly effect, some kind of ripple effect of the choices you made before that turned you into who you are now, is not going to change anything about who you are now. It's your mindset that actually matters, as opposed to that ripple effect that you're trying to blame.
Okay.
I think my speech both tackles the butterfly effect, and also when I wrote it, I aimed that it would create a butterfly ripple effect, with especially in the topic that I was discussing. within the speech, I heavily discussed how different people took up space and their ability to, you know, encourage a more inclusive industry created a ripple effect to one that's now starting to separate away from the very Eurocentric beauty standards and starting to become more inclusive and diverse. And when my speech also dealt with how the Eurocentric beauty standards has negative effects on different deeper toned women. And I addressed it with how with my personal experience. And so I hope that with all of that I discussed, it will create a conversation that will inevitably create a butterfly effect with how people view beauty. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, actually, I wanted to.
Yeah, exactly. I just wanted to add a couple comments from my own understanding of their respective speech. One of the strong impressions I had from Victor's speech was the notion of looking at the same life but with better eyes, right? This message like emphasizes on a positive outlook on things, a positive reflection, changing your life views. So I felt that our like your personal perspective of failure of the other side triggers a bigger effect on your outlook of life. Like it can make your mistakes a critical reflections for something bigger, um, which Victor has talked about extensively. I think it relates to a bigger effect in your life's narrative on how you look at things and how it can impact you a lot. And in terms of Jasmine, I think it was great as to how you, as a connoisseur for beauty products, realized the gap in mainstream beauty culture and the ripple effects on people's self-confidence. And I greatly appreciate you speaking on the issue. Like, for instance, when C quotes, choose your honor, space your feelings, choose you in order to chip away the obstacles for the neglected to catalyze a cultural reset. It's also very contemporary on the ongoing movements. So I think both the speeches were very good and like linked to the butterfly to a very great and contemporary context as well. These are the comments from my side. Thank you.
Thank you.
How was the journey you guys had when you guys were coming up with your speech? Like what factors played into your drafting your speeches, working towards it? How did you feel at the end of it?
Um, so for my speech, like I said, it was actually, I am beginning to agree with you. It was a sort of a butterfly effect of of things I was thinking about and writing when I was younger. So, well, not when I'm still young, but just recently before that, about 3 years ago, in my previous school, I always used to be like a sort of social misfit because I was way younger than everyone else, every other one of my colleagues. So I found it hard to integrate within the community. And so most times I would just sit on the outskirts, sit outside and observe what they did, observe how what they did affected them, because I knew that it would be much harder to involve myself. So in the process of sitting on the outside and seeing whatever happened, I sort of realized that this is something that actually happens. People blame the choices and never really realize it. So that was my spark. That was my starting point. And from there, I started writing things in a small journal, writing things and opinions about what I thought of the things I saw. Starting with my analogy of the ice cream, and then that journal sort of progressed into a reflection of my daily experiences in life, into a reflection of, well, not daily, but the experiences in life that I felt were worth keeping. For example, for example, the time my father told me about my grandfather, that story really inspired me. It changed my outlook on life. So I wrote it down, and my experience of applying to this school was also life-changing. So I wrote that down. altogether it seemed to fit together into this speech. So that's what brought it together.
My starting point when it came to writing the speech, I always wanted to talk about makeup. I just didn't know the direction that I was going to go in. And after like talking to some of my friends, talking to my family, a lot of times when I discuss makeup, it was always about the discrepancies and the gaps within the industry. And when I wanted to try to speech, I wanted to write a speech that reflected my views that were often not spoken about, because you can go online and you can research makeup and it's always the same things coming up, and it's never the negative side of makeup. Yeah, it says like the feminist movement and stuff, but like there hasn't really tackled an issue of the colorism in makeup. And that was something that I felt was very important for me to speak about, because everything that I spoke about is something that I've experienced. And because I've loved makeup for such a long time, I've experienced the change, and I wanted it to reflect how I felt. So at the end, when I finished writing it, it almost felt like a relief, because there was always that pressure, like, do I speak about it? Would people reciprocate? Would people just think, no, she's just going again about the same thing? And, I wanted to show people from the outside world who aren't really in the beauty industry and don't really see it, the downside in this very Eurocentric beauty industry that we have right now. So at the end, I felt that I did achieve it by showing people on the outside what it's like to be a dark-skinned girl trying to just be pretty, I guess.
Yeah. So I guess for both of you guys, it was always something that you had an inner passion about, something that you just always, an idea you always had Ruth spreading. So in the process of writing your TED speeches, did you learn anything new, anything significant? Did your perspective or your ideas ever change along the way? Because I know a lot of different speakers often say that halfway through the journey they realize that there's so much that they didn't know. Was that the case with you guys, or do you think you stuck to your initial ideas all the way through?
For me, I can say I stuck with my initial idea, but there's also a lot I learned along the way. See, because at first, I wasn't intending to put it as a speech. It was just a couple of thoughts I had in my journal that I deemed personal and significant to me. So turning thoughts into a speech, the process of turning thoughts into a speech proved to be, more difficult than I had anticipated, because there's a lot of other things you have to consider when it's a speech. You have to appeal to an audience. You have to see, there's things that I find good to me that that a certain group in the audience may not understand. So I have to find a way to put it in a way that the audience will easily relate with and understand. So I think my biggest learning point through the process of writing the speech was finding a way to turn my thoughts into words and to appeal to the audience.
For me personally, when I was writing it, it did change around halfway, at least the direction I was going, because as much as I did want to talk about makeup, I also wanted to create a foundation where what I'm talking about can be applied to different areas in people's lives. So as much as I was talking about makeup, I was also talking about taking up space in industries that don't reflect or don't provide for your wants and needs. So the audience played a huge role. Like when I was at my turning point, I wanted to make it more something that the audience could take something away, because makeup can be such a niche topic. So when I started developing into taking up space, that's when I actually started developing more ideas and seeing how the importance of different factors within the industry. But yeah.
Exactly. So during your process of throughout your speeches, both of you have extracted very personal anecdotes, like certain chapters of your life, which have played a significant role to contribute to the speech content. How do you think your personal extracts relate to the audience, to the general wider audience? Like the personal anecdotes you've picked for the speeches, for the title, how do you think you could relate to the audience through it, to a more general audience?
So for my speech, I chose to put three stories. Three, well, thought there were wide-ranging stories to cover, to appeal to as much of an audience as possible. I was also driven to represent myself, to represent who I am, and to represent my country. So I wanted to find a way to bring in, to appeal to both the school audience here and to the audience I know I have at home. So for my second story, I brought an experience from home, a more personal experience of family. And for my third story, I brought an experience that students here hopefully could relate to, because it was talking about my school experience. And then for my first story, I wanted something that would engage the audience. So I just wanted to cover as much of the audience as possible while keeping them engaged.
When it came to mine, I wanted to kind of share my story and, just because I kind of developed it from a young age to a point where I realized that, I'm not catered for. And the way the way I told it, I hope that it would relate to the audience, because I'm assuming that everyone has gotten through different stages in their life. And when they first realize that, I'm actually different, people actually don't see me. So my antidote, if I'm saying that correctly, I hope that it allowed me to engage with the audience, because they were able to see times where they weren't adequate, or the first time they realized that I'm different in the world or this industry that I put so much value to as a young kid. So yeah.
Okay, so we're about halfway, a little bit more than halfway through our discussion. So we're opening up the Q&A to the audience, to the participants. If there's any questions from anyone that they'd like to ask any of the speakers.
And not just questions, if you guys have comments as to how do you guys relate to the speeches, or what you guys took away, any brief things or questions to the speakers, please voice them.
I wanted to say that I really liked both of your speeches, and I think they were very good executed. And I just kind of related to it, not like very related to it, but I see your point, and I'm happy that someone talks about it and that it's noticed.
Okay.
Thank you.
Katie, you had your hand raised.
Yeah, so my question is for both of you. Firstly, I want to say that your speeches were really good. They were really phenomenal and interesting to listen to. But my question is, when you were still planning your speeches, I'm assuming you both had a takeaway that you wanted your audience to have. So my question is, when you were writing your speech, what was the biggest, if you could have like one sentence, what you wanted people to gain from your speech, what would that be? And were you able to have that same one takeaway with your outcome, or do you think that ended up changing based on the overall, performance speech that you had at the end?
Yes, I did have a takeaway, as my speech basically culminated into telling the audience to have a better outlook on life in general. So whichever part appealed to them, my main intention was for them to leave the speech knowing that they should have a better outlook on life.
I think the one sentence to show what I wanted my audience to take away from it, ultimately would be to take up space for the next people. And I think it really just depends on the person to who is listening on how they would interpret that. But yeah, I think that's also linked with being more observant, and also give the audience can know, like, see that when they decide to stand up for themselves, they aren't just affecting them, they're affecting everyone around them and affecting how the world views a certain person. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Banfu said she has 2 questions. Um,
Yeah, hi everyone. Yeah, I really enjoyed your speeches, just as like everyone else has been saying. And I have like individual questions for each of you. So I guess my first question would be to Jasmine. Your topic around makeup touches on a lot of intersectionalities within the makeup industry, such as like catering to women, and especially like you say colorism, and how that has like a lot of its presence within the makeup industry. And I just like to ask you what you think about like the rise or the growing trend, quote unquote trend, within makeup industries, in that I feel like they've sort of clocked like the importance of being inclusive and including people of a variety of skin tones. However, do you feel like this sort of like growth in awareness is tokenism isn't the word that I'm looking for, sort of like a gimmick, if that makes sense, like that it's something that like they've co-opted because of the trends that like people are leaning more towards consuming, wanting to see content of a wider variety. However, a lot of these companies still have some issues structurally with fully incorporating people of various skin tones. Or do you see it as just like a general improvement, if that makes sense, or like seeing it as genuine? That's my question. I don't know if I should ask Victor's question now or wait for Jasmine to answer.
Probably wait.
Okay.
Okay. One thing that I have noticed is that, especially when I was writing my speech, was that a lot of the time, especially the older companies, not the brand new ones, funded brand new ones like Fenty Beauty or Beauty Bakery, a lot of the time the old ones are doing it as a publicity stunt in order to gain more movement back to their product, because they've seen that, you know what, there's actually a market for like deeper toned women, because before they could get away with saying, oh no, it's too expensive to make them like products for them, it's too this, it's too that. But obviously now that as they've seen the effect that brands such as Fenty Beauty have made, they've seen that actually there's a market for them. And a lot of the time I do think that it's a publicity stunt and a gimmick, and it's not necessarily that they're trying to be inclusive. And it may not be noticeable when they are releasing it, but then like when certain things happen and it's time for them to actually defend these Black women, or when it comes to endorsing or creating ambassadors for their brand, there are very few Black women, or it's just one Black woman. It's usually the same Black woman for most of the brands. And they can say they're trying to be more inclusive, but it is sometimes a gimmick. And as much as it's like, it's very sad that it is a gimmick, I think sometimes it is important that regardless of if it's a publicity stunt, that it's seen, like that they are having decent, more inclusive stuff. But at the end of the day, when they are inclusive, the products don't match deeper tones. So they can say, oh yeah, we'll have a foundation shade for you, but then they don't get it right. And I don't know, I hope I answered your question, but yeah, I do believe that a lot of the times it is just for trend. And when it comes to supporting Black girls or anything, they're usually quiet, or they say, oh no, we're not trying to get into that right now. But yeah.
Thanks, Jasmine. And then my other question would be for Victor, in that, you know, like your your stance on how like I really enjoyed the analogy about like going to the movies and all the different flavors and all. And so my question to the the core of your speech would be about how the difficulties in changing all these perspectives, and that like do you think that like just saying that all you need to do is change your outlook on life can fall into the realm of like a sort of toxic positivity? Yeah, that's my question to your thoughts on that.
Okay. I think, well, I obviously advocate for having a better outlook on life, but having a better outlook does not necessarily mean having too much of a positive outlook on life, because then that's when it becomes toxic. I think there was a point when I talked about I think there's a point when I talked about the two extremes, treating something you want like it's everything, in which case you're leaving no room for a life without it, and then it becomes a good excuse for a failure, or treating something you want like it's nothing, in which case you're the only one to blame. So both those extremes are situations I would see as either toxic positivity or toxic negativity, depending on how you look at it. So what I'm trying to strive for is to show how what you really need is a balance of both. You need a positive outlook, but I brought it from the perspective of you need to appreciate the positive outlook because of the negative things that are happening in your life. Like, don't have an outlook so positive that you'll forget that these are actually bad things that happen that you need to first of all appreciate. So at the end of the day, you need a balance. You need not to forget that, that these are still bad things that happen. But my main message was not having too much of a positive outlook. It was just saying, if you have a negative outlook, do not dwell too much on it. You should shift that perspective and have, and strike a balance between the two. Hope I've answered the question.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Banfu, Victor, Jasmine. Are there any more questions from our attendees to the speakers?
Yeah, 5 minutes left.
I have a question. Morning, everybody. From my end, I also greatly enjoyed both of their speeches, and I just wanted to ask that, with writing a speech and having a time, you have to think about condensing your thoughts into like a short but impactful speech. So I was just wondering if after you wrote your speech and after you posted it, if you had any afterthoughts that came to you and you wish you could add, or if you were content with everything, that's also okay.
I think I was rather content with how it came out. However, I wish I could dwell more on how without subconsciously, how the beauty industry does affect how people view everything around them, or how people develop preferences and how people see worth and purpose. That was an afterthought that I had and wish I developed more into. Yeah.
For me, I think I was also happy with the way it came out, because I actually used to have a problem of worrying too much about what I said and what I missed out and all that. But if we're being real here, this wasn't supposed to be a video. Had the pandemic not happened, we would have been giving a live speech, in which case I wouldn't want to have gone back and redone the speech, like in cases where you can redo a video. So at the end of the day, if we're like in a live atmosphere, the emphasis is not on the small details that you may or may not have missed. I think for me, my big drive is to get my main idea into the is to get my main idea conveyed to the audience, regardless of the details I use or the details I may miss. And so to do that, I condense the process of condensing my speech. I just pick the maybe 1, 2, or 3 main points that I want the audience to leave having remembered, and whichever details I use, I make sure that those 3 main points are there, and I make them explicit, and then I don't mind too much about the details.
Okay, thank you so much, Victor, Jasmine, everyone else for coming. So we have a break now, and we're just gonna wrap up the meeting, and afterwards we have, I believe, Banele and Sabu, that discussion led by Banfu and Lutle. So yeah, thank you all for coming, and
Exactly. Thank you so much for coming. Please visit again. The next session is happening from 11 to 11:40.
Yeah.
The session name is Direct Impact and Direct Communities. It will be just as much entertaining and interesting to participate in these discussions and voice your questions. Like, please participate in the further sessions as well. Thank you everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you. This should end soon.